This ZeroNow program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
First, I'd like to introduce Brandon Roan, who's joining us. He's on vacation, and I'm glad that he took the time to join us. Brandon is with North Penn School District. Brandon, would you just mind introducing yourself and your background and connection to the topic of emergency response?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. Love being able to hang out with you folks for an hour. So I'm the Director of School Safety at North Penn School District. We are the 8th largest school district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Prior to joining North Penn, I spent some time as a Director of Training for an organization doing response option training, both for civilian and law enforcement. And then prior to that, 17 years as a police officer, retiring as an operations captain.
Awesome, and very active on the board of directors of the National Council of School Safety Directors. So, Brandon, glad you could join us. First time joining us is John Clark. So, John is a safety and security director at Loudoun County Public Schools. John, would you mind just providing your background and connection to the topic, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. John Clark, Director of Safety and Security, Loudoun County Public Schools. If you're not familiar with Loudoun County, we're about 30 miles west of Washington, D.C., have about 100 schools, 83,000 students, about 15,000 employees. Prior to joining Loudoun County, I served as a special agent with the United States Secret Service for 23 years.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Glad you could join us. Also involved in the National Council of School Safety Directors and representing higher education, Robin Schusko. Thank you for joining us, Robin. Would you mind just providing your background at Frederick Community College? And what's amazing is that talk about emergency planning and response. Robin and John both had a situation yesterday in the DC region. But Robin, just we'll go into that in a minute. But just please provide your background, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here. Super excited to share in conversation with John and Brandon. I am the Chief of Campus Police and Director of Public Safety at Frederick Community College. I am a retired law enforcement officer, and I've been in my chief's position for about 6 years now. And our department is responsible for emergency management, emergency planning, anything EHS. So you say emergency planning, that's us.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. And I just want to remind participants, if you have a question for Robin, John, or Brandon, please hit the Q&A button. And something's messed up with my control, so I can't see the questions. So Kyrie, if you wouldn't mind just posting those questions in Slack as they come in, I'll just look at that on the back end. But I think you guys will see it anyway, so we'll circle back. But we'll take some of your questions a little bit further on the program. So Robin and John, Robin, we'll start with you. Yesterday, we in the DC region, I think most of the East Coast, we were impacted by severe weather. Tornadoes were touching down along the region. I know we planned for severe weather. How did you deal with that yesterday, and were you prepared to respond to the situation, Robin?
So I pride our department on being prepared. I'm sure everyone can relate when I say it was chaos. I'm also sure that everyone can relate that whatever decision you make, it's not going to be popular with everyone. And so I'll say from yesterday, our incident severe weather, we have several severe weather drills, emergency preparedness drills, every semester. And ironically, we had one scheduled for today. I have canceled that because we did, in fact, practice it yesterday. The fluidity of the situation with the tornado warnings and watch was some of what sparked our immediate evacuation, immediate release of classes. We originally put out a notice that we were going to close at a certain time. And due to extenuating circumstances and the storm moving much quicker than we had anticipated, we certainly had no choice but to enact our plan a little early. So, like I said, we have our plans, we practice our plans, and we were ready.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. And John, what about in Loudoun? How are you prepared, or how are you preparing to respond yesterday if there was an incident that happened closer to the Loudoun County area?
Yeah, absolutely. We did make the difficult decision to continue with a normal schedule yesterday. A lot of our school divisions nearby to us were closing or dismissing early, and we made that difficult decision to continue on with classes based on how the projected weather forecast was going to hit Loudoun County specifically. Sure enough, however, about 11 a.m. yesterday, we did have a tornado warning come through Loudoun County for the southeastern portion of our county. And we do practice shelter in place responses every single year. And traditionally, ironically, we do those drills in March. So we were ready to go. We don't do it often. We don't get a lot of tornadoes here in the Loudoun County area. But we did get the warning. We did put about 70 of our schools into a shelter in place mode, and we remained there until the warning had expired. But we were prepared for it, although we don't do it frequently.
And Brandon, I mean, what types of drills do you recommend that a typical school district do apply? And let's talk about North Penn specifically. What sort of drills do you apply? Do you have
Yes.
tornadoes in an area?
Yeah, so much like John, we're only a couple miles up the road, up 95 north of where John is, and we too had a watch versus a warning. But typically, our schools we do those typical shelter in place drills where obviously we put students in the hallways around the concretes and brick away from glass and doors and things of that nature to be prepared for high winds and debris and things becoming airborne and projectiles. And that's something that I require of our district. It's not only is it required by law, but I also require it to be done on a regular cadence, not just a one time a year that we are required to do it for these very types of reasons, right? All of a sudden you get a warning or a watch. And if you haven't done it in 365 days, people tend to forget what that really looks and feels like. So it is something that I encourage our principals and we make our schools do it regularly.
So in addition to severe weather drills, and obviously your fire drills, what are some other drills and that you do execute at your district, Brandon?
Yeah, so obviously we have severe weather drills. We have lockout, which some obviously is for an external concern or a threat that doesn't impact the educational process in the building. Obviously, we have our active shooter drills, which is always an option-based response. For those empowering those to make decisions based on the information that they received or that they know about where that threat is. And then on top of that, we also do crisis communication, right? So how are we using our communication channels effectively throughout our drills and training? And I think sometimes those those details get forgotten about, right? And we just kind of think about, oh, well, yeah, we'll do it when it happens, but we really don't walk through that communication piece during the actual drilling process. And so I think it's important that we also drill that piece as well to make sure that we are getting out accurate information as timely as possible.
Robin, please.
Yeah, Brandon, I'm so glad that you mentioned clarity and cadence because that is something that I speak about a lot. We have got to have that clarity, the cadence, and the practice. We don't need a bunch more documents. We need that clarity, we need that cadence, and we need that practice. Otherwise, we are not going to have our executive leadership in a position where they are ready.
Well, Brandon, please.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I was just with an organization last week, and we were doing a tabletop exercise. And one of the things that I think oftentimes people forget is you have these plans, right? And in this particular tabletop exercise, the organization was broken out into three groups. And of the three groups, only one of the three groups actually went to their plan that was on the table right in front of them to walk through the exercise, right? So I think sometimes we get so caught up in the moment, right? Robin, to your point about being clear, right? We get kind of caught up in the moment. We forget that we actually wrote plans to address the problem. And if we just kind of go back and open the book, it will help us walk us through that process to make sure that we are clear and concise along the way.
Robin.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, and I'm sure John can appreciate this. We in similar realms here, but we routinely, and I know both of those guys feel the same, and probably many on the call, we routinely find the plan very solid, this is a great plan, a lot of pages, a lot of inserts. It's a big binder. It looks fantastic. But we see that stall, at least in my opinion, we see that stall happen right at the beginning because there are so many people that know the plan, but they don't know what to do with the plan. So we know it exists, but we don't know what to do. And so we assume that other people are doing things. And that goes back to that clarity we were talking about.
Well, let's talk about clarity, John Clark. Like yesterday, I mentioned the severe weather. I used the term lockdown, right? But that's not a lockdown. It is a shelter in place. So at that moment of crisis, how do you convey the definitions of what the situation is? Lockdown, lockout, shelter in place. What are the different, and how do you make sure that everyone is on the same page with that? I've heard a number of superintendents discussing that we need to define what those terms are, but how do you define that and make sure that that's crystal clear when there is an incident?
Yeah, absolutely. It all goes back to training, right? So we've adopted the standard response protocols here in Loudoun County. We train on those throughout the school year. In fact, we created a specific unit within our safety and security division solely dedicated to training and emergency management. So we put a huge emphasis on training. We do tabletop exercises at every school every year. We do back to school training. We do undercover security assessments at every school at least twice a year. And our law enforcement partners are a big piece of all of those. And for example, when we do our tabletop exercises, I think Robin mentioned that sometimes the plan is slow to get initiated, right? And I think that's due to the fact that 9 times out of 10, the people you pre-designate to lead certain roles are not there on the day of the emergency. And I think that's important to know. So as part of our tabletop exercises, we always take that into account and say, look, here are the people that are here today for your exercise. We understand that John is not here and he normally leads the transportation aspect to your crisis management plan. So who's going to do it today? And it forces them to think outside the box and pick the next person up, so to speak.
Robin.
John, if I can add, I think one of the things that a lot of us on this call are well aware of, sort of incident command, so ICS or unified command, and those missionary areas. And one of the things that I often talk to my folks about is this PACE model. Of course, anybody that's familiar with ICS knows about that. But basically, you have your primary, you have your alternate, you have your contingency, and you have your emergency. And if you don't have those levels, people are going to scramble. It's chaos. And we already know that the first couple of minutes are chaotic. And so absolutely, you have to have that second or third layer of folks that are willing to step up.
Well, so interesting. A few years ago, I wrote an article about the most important minutes, right? That very first minute when a threat is detected, whether severe weather, active assailant, chemical spill, whatever that threat is, that first minute, who do you notify? Who do you make aware of the situation? Mobilizing resources, right? You mobilize, like, John mentioned law enforcement, who on the school team needs to be part of that, and then collaborating. So creating that, incident command or unified command. Brandon, I mean, who should be a part of a unified command in any given situation? Is it different members of a unified command depending on the incident, or is it the same core group of people?
Yeah, so your unified command definitely will have different members, right? And it's going to be based on the incident. It's going to be based on the jurisdiction, right? So for me, my district is made up with 6 different municipalities, right? So I have 6 local chiefs of police. I have 6 fire chiefs. I have 6 emergency managements. I have 6, governing bodies, whether there's a township, a board of commissioners or board of directors or a township manager, right? So there's varying levels of that, right? And then I have 60 administrators, right? Now, so not every administrator will be in the unified command, but administrators nonetheless, right? So you think about, right, your building administrator, if it's at a building, you have myself, you have somebody from our communications department who's going to be the PIO, public information officer who's going to share the messaging. And then obviously you have those outside resources that I talked about, right? So there's going to be some level of command staff from the police department, some level of command staff from EMS, some level of command staff from fire. Obviously, and then we're all in one room getting information from different entities out in the field, and then we are discussing the next steps to then put those orders out for that work to be done and completed. And so it's very important that, one of the things I say all the time to find out who your partners are is not during the emergency. So if you are not having meet and greets and conversations, and if you don't have a cell phone number or a direct contact to your chief of police, your fire chief, your emergency, if you don't have those contacts by now, you're late to the game. So please reach out to those folks, and make some contacts and make relationships and build friendships, so that when that time comes and that bell rings and that unified command structure pops up, they're not putting a name to a face for the first time.
Great advice. Robin, please go ahead.
Brandon, I'm glad you brought up making those connections, because just after the last two recent events we not only had the severe weather yesterday, but we actually had a water main break on Friday. So I've had two incidents back to back. And in both cases, I have made contact with a partner whom I already have an established relationship. And some of you may be familiar with Frederick, but our college borders Fort Detrick, right on the line. And so if you can imagine, we share a property line with them, and we are trying to figure out where the water valve shut off, or we might need to get onto their property. It's much easier for me to call the Directorate of Emergency Management and say, hey, Paul, it's Robin. That goes a long way versus trying to find someone's email, find someone's phone number.
Two great ways to start building those relationships on the front end or through planning and training. In Loudoun County, we incorporate all of our public safety folks into creating each school's crisis management plan. So we do that every summer and then work through it as we need to throughout the school year. And then training. I mentioned before, public safety, they're a big part of all the training that we do here in Loudoun County, from our tabletop exercises to our reunification drills to active assailant drills. So those are great ways to build those relationships on the front end.
Awesome. Brandon, please.
Yeah, and I think that's important, John, and I thanks for raising that. It is important. We also always open our buildings. I was just on the phone with a lieutenant today who wants to use the school for training. So we do that very often.
Robin, you're back. I hope that wasn't an emergency on your end. We lost you.
No, I'm not sure what was happening. I was thinking maybe we had a tech issue, and our plans are really being tested. I was echoing the sentiments of what John and Brandon already shared.
So John, in a unified command, let's say, no, Brandon, I can't believe how many schools and how many jurisdictions you have in your area. My head was spinning, and at least John, I think you only have one jurisdiction to contend with. But who quarterbacks that unified command if there is an incident, and does that change based on the severe weather versus like a potential active shooter or some other type of incident? Who is that quarterback? Who leads that unified or incident command?
Yeah, so I think the initial response is always with the principal, right? In the first minute of an incident, they're in charge and they got to get the ball rolling. Once public safety arrives and it's determined to be a public safety incident or event, they are going to run incident command. From a Loudoun County schools perspective, we always teach the school to send the assistant principal to the incident command post to serve as that school liaison. In addition, we send a rep from our safety and security division. Our transportation division also sends a rep there. And I think that's important because, as we all know, our principals have a lot on their plates during a school emergency. They're dealing with central office, the PIO, et cetera. That assistant principal needs to be there as that school liaison for the incident command post and specifically for public safety.
And John, what role do you have as a safety and security director during that process?
Yeah, so we've also created what we call a crisis response center here in Loudoun County. So senior leaders like myself, the superintendent, we will gather in a location to manage that crisis and make decisions at an executive level. Obviously, at the school level, the incident level, that incident command post is running things at the school level. They are preserving life, limb, and property. We, as an executive crisis response center, we are making macro decisions in terms of next steps, possibly in terms of recovery for the division as a whole.
And Robin, how does that similar, or how is that similar? How is that different on the higher education side of things? Who is your quarterback during an incident?
So not much different, very similar. And actually, this is why we have incident command. So we have ICS, we have unified command, so that folks understand that across jurisdiction or across departments, across school districts, whatever that looks like. So John or Brandon could come to our campus and be ready to go because they have familiarity with ICS. They understand unified command, and as could I to their district. Just because you don't necessarily know all the players does not mean you don't know how to run an incident, or you're not familiar with ICS. So to answer your question, it's very similar to what John already said, except we don't have a principal. And how do you handle that when you don't have a principal? And if public safety and campus police is housed in one building, what does that look like if the incident happens not to be in that building? Who is the quote principal, and what does that look like? And so part of the reason why we do so many drills, we do that cross training, we provide internal training just to certain departments, just so that they feel comfortable. We want them to have the authority and the ability to take action immediately, and then we can look at who assumes that lead once we have something in that area under control.
And Robin, while we're still connected, before you, hopefully you don't freeze up again, what would you mind just defining the incident command versus unified command? Because we have a lot of folks on here that may not have a background in either one of those, but just from a definitional perspective.
Sure. So when we are talking about incident command, it's this structure. Basically, there are several layers beyond the incident commander, and so you look at people that are important to that structure, such as what John and Brandon mentioned. We need a PIO. We need a liaison. We need somebody as our safety person. There's lots of layers, and if you happen to look at an ICS structure chart, you'll see it does very much look like a flow chart. And if you can enact that, if you can put that into place, you can fill in that chart with, okay, I know these folks are responsible for operations. I know these folks are responsible for logistics. I know these folks are responsible for finance. And it provides, back to that, what we talked about before, it provides a lot of clarity. But you still need the backups, right? So make sure you don't just fill in one layer of a box. Versus unified command, that would be if we allowed our Fort Detrick partners, we allowed our public school partners, we allowed our Frederick City police partners to come onto our campus because there was some incident that affects them. And by that, I mean, I already told you we border Fort Detrick. We also have a high school right at the edge of our property. And we are also part of the Frederick City limits for police response. And so it's very likely that partners from those agencies would come to our campus. So who's in charge and who makes the decisions and what happens once we're all together? Is it me because I'm the chief of police at Frederick? Is it the chief of police for Frederick City, Fort Detrick? Everybody's going to want to have a say. So that unified command allows us to come together, provide a response for the incident, but also allows us to have the ability for, I'll just use the four of us to make decisions for our specific teams in a unified way. And also, very important, we are all sending out the same communication. That has to be critical, because if Fort Detrick is sending out something to their folks and we're sending something different, it's gonna expand very quickly to chaos.
Is anybody else not hearing R, or is it just me?
Oh, it was me, Brandon. Thank you for pointing that out. I was blabbing on here and I was on mute. I was going to say we're about halfway through, and we definitely want to dive into communications in a greater depth, Rob, in just a minute here. But if you have questions, we're about halfway through. Just hit the Q&A button on your screen, and we'll start answering those. So Brock asked a question. I was actually about to bring this up. And John, this is directed to you about Loudon, and this could Brandon and Robin. This could, all three of you can respond to this. When we're talking about and I lost the question here, about the crisis response center, is that a physical building or can it also be virtual? Like Brandon is in Cayman Islands. If he's on vacation, can he be plugged into that virtually? So how does that work in Loudon, John?
Yeah, it's actually both. So we do have a physical space that we will deploy resources to, phone lines, et cetera. We also have a virtual space through Microsoft Teams.
Okay, so you can pull in whoever needs to be there, and that's important. So thanks for that, John, and thanks for the question. Brandon, please.
Yeah, I'm also with John. We use both. So yesterday, the cabinet group was discussing what we were going to do, what action steps we were going to take, and everybody else was in person in the administration building. And so I was, as you mentioned, I was virtual, being a part of some of those conversations. So we do have both, and we have the capabilities to fire those up pretty quickly.
Great. And that's obviously, and do you recommend having a communications person in that unified command? Robin, you mentioned, making sure that you all have a common message. How do you coordinate that messaging? Is that planned in advance? Who determines what messaging to share with the community? And so how do you avoid message drift during that whole process?
That's an incredibly difficult thing to manage. But part of the reason why we have that unified command is so that the PIO for the district or the PIO for the city, whatever unified command you're part of, we are getting information from the outside. We're getting information from our own teams. We're getting information from those affected by the incident. And so what is it that you believe? And I think John and Brandon can agree that you absolutely cannot send out any messages unless you have something confirmed. Now, you can send out messages that provide a very short snippet of something and says something to the effect of, update in 5 minutes. Gives you a minute or two to collect whatever it is you need to collect, but people need something. They have got to have something in the first 60 minutes. And if it's not accurate, you'll know real quick.
Oh, wait, did you mean 60 seconds? Because I do know that, with students, with every student being equipped with a mobile phone, they start chattering immediately with their parents, with friends, with the public, with social media. And I know that things can get unwieldy. And one of the things we talked about in the last session about planning is having a ready to go holding message. So as soon as there's a threat detected, the school is aware of the incident, more information will follow. At least you get something out there immediately because the kids go and then they start going down their own pathways. What are your thoughts on that, Robin?
It's critical that you have someone also monitoring social media because of that very reason. Students are quick and they have their own, what I like to call mini language. So it will get out and it will get out quick. And so we particularly use templates. And I'm sure that most of you have some version thereof, but it is critical that you have templates. And even you could have templates for things that you wouldn't think that could ever happen. So gas leak, water main break, airstrike, I don't know, whatever it is, it's easier to have a template to fill in than trying to draft from scratch. You lose a lot of time.
Exactly, Brandon, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, one of the things is it's important to be accurate versus being first, right? And so oftentimes people want to be first, and you see where there is misinformation put out there because they want to be they want to get something out, right? And then they have to come back and recant on that first message. And while we talk about, you need to take some of the time to make sure that information is accurate when you put it out there. And so we had a situation here a couple months ago where we had a student with a firearm in school, and so right, it's like what's that message that goes out, right? You have, 3,200 kids in a building. In the absence of information, people will invoke their doctorate from MSU. And don't let the facts get in the way of a good story or an opinion. But it's important to say, okay, here's what we know at this time, right? And we will come back with an update when we have further details. And so maybe you don't have the whole story, but if you have enough factual information to say, yes, we know there's a problem. Yes, we are addressing the issue. Yes, people are safe at this time. Let's put that out, right? Those three things that we know are true and accurate. Let's put that out. And then we can come back with further details about, is the school going to have early dismissal? Is there any other impact? Is there, are there things being done differently? And so those first couple minutes of gathering that information, I'm fortunate enough to have an entire communications department that I can go to them and say, okay, here's what I know. Now you guys craft a message. And then we, as a team, we come back, and it's always in draft form. We always review it to check it for accuracy, to make sure what we are saying is in fact true and accurate. And we also have people who are also monitoring, the neighborhood social media sites and our social media sites, to help, quell some of the misinformation that's been put out there in those early few minutes before the message got out. So it is important. And if you are in a smaller organization where you don't have a department that does that, you certainly can make that happen with one or two people. Just be able to identify, okay, here's what we know, here's what is true and accurate, here's what we can put out, and then we can come back to more details or in-depth details as the event has unfolded, and everybody's in a position of safety. Now you can start unpacking that other information.
Yep.
Yeah, and we have pre-drafted messages as well. And like Brandon said earlier, it's all about those relationships, right? Developing those relationships on the front end. And that goes for the PIOs as well, right? Our PIOs are always consulting with our public safety PIOs before any messaging is pushed out.
Yeah, and that's
Great.
true, John. The incident that I talked about, right? So we have the district communications department, and we also have the local PD. We were all working together, so we weren't putting out a message before they were ready, right? Because now we're talking about juvenile law and charges and all those kind of things. So what can we share? What can't we share? Obviously, everybody wants to know. And so getting back to that unified command, right? Where both entities are having those conversations as to what can we put out. Is there going to be a further investigation? And we don't want to taint that. So there's so much we can put out or say, because this may be ongoing, or is this isolated to this particular individual in this particular situation, and maybe we can share more details. So it goes back to, right, working together, that unified structure.
And so how do you communicate? Do you get the old phone tree going? Okay, John's going to call Brandon, Brandon's going to call Robin, call three other people. I mean, and Robin, how do you communicate? And John and Brandon, I'd like to hear from you as well. I mean, I'm assuming you have an emergency notification system or some sort of platform to communicate.
Yes, so we do have an emergency notification system. We also utilize our PA. Some of that emergency notification allows us to send an email and a text at the same time. It also allows probably everybody has some variation of this, but allows a screen takeover to provide an emergency message on all campus computers, so that folks that maybe have their phone off, aren't checking email, don't hear their phone ring, whatever, the screen completely takes over with whatever the emergency message is. And that is critical, especially in class when professors probably do not have their phone with them, or at least it's not on. So they wouldn't even know to check email. They wouldn't know to even look for a text message. And I'm sure Brandon and John can relate when you use a PA system. How often is it tested? Can you hear it throughout the building? Does it project into every classroom? Does it just project into the hallway? So all of those things have to be accounted for. But we utilize majority of our endpoints, whether it's social media, the emergency notification, PA. We hit it all just to make sure.
Yeah, very
What about
similar
loud?
for us. Yeah, very similar for us. We are PA first and foremost. We're getting on that PA announcing the emergency. We have pre-recorded audio announcements that go out. There are visual cues to an ongoing emergency as well. We also have an app-based technology that allows for mass communications, mass notifications, intelligence sharing, direct dial to 911. So it's a host of different layers that we have in place to make sure everyone's notified.
Yeah, I think the
Great.
biggest word here that should be used in this conversation is redundancy, right? There's multiple ways of communicating the message, not only to the stakeholders internally involved at the location of the incident, but also that redundancy getting messaging out to, to parents and community members, right? So, much like Robin, we use text messaging, email, and a phone call, and that can be done, quite frankly, anywhere. So there was a situation in the district today where we had to get a message out in regards to a particular incident at a building. And so again, from where I'm at in Cayman back to PA, coordinated right through with all the folks, and then that message goes out again in that draft form to make sure all the information is true and accurate. And then we can send it out. So there's multiple layers, multiple ways, and multiple people involved. Just so that if we were relying on one person today, we would have been in trouble because one of our communication folks is also on vacation. So again, I think redundancy, and I think we all know in this business when it comes to emergencies, there is no one way to do everything. There are multiple ways to do anything and everything out there. We just have to know what they are.
Brandon said it 3 times. I'll say it 3 more times. Redundancy, redundancy, redundancy. I mean, no matter what, any technology can fail, a human can fail. And that's why having those multiple layers and just being redundant is absolutely critical. Now, John, I'd love to learn something from you. Actually, before that, Robin, you had a comment.
Just to tack on to your information bit about the technology piece, I think more and more we're beginning to rely on that. And we also have to have this level of preparedness that accounts for when technology goes down. And so if we had to get a message out and we didn't have access to that technology, how are we getting that message out? So something also very important to think about.
Exactly, and Robin, with technology, like I mentioned, like there's always a chance that a technology will fail. So if you're doing text messages, you might have a cell tower out, or you might have a network that is inoperable, or the phone lines may be down. So there's always something that can be. But if you have that multimodal message going to multiple places, now the one type of messaging I was going to ask John, and from a K-12 perspective, I know Robin, you probably have all the students are all probably signed up to receive text alerts. Do you have students in the K-12 environment, John? Do they receive text alerts, or who does receive different types of communication? What do parents receive? What do students receive? What do you receive in the building, etc.?
So students do not receive text alerts. They are alerted through our unified communication systems, which are in place at all schools, through the PA, obviously. Parents are alerted through our communications office, through ConnectEd, and then staff are alerted through our security technology and different applications that we use here in Loudoun County.
Brandon, what about you at North Penn?
Typically students do not, but we do have the capability to send messages to students. So every student in our district has a registered email account because of all the, one-to-one device technology and accounts and all those things. So we certainly can push out emails to students. I will say in the primary grades or elementary grades, we don't see students using that email account a lot. However, at the secondary, the middle school level and the high school, students do use that student email account pretty regularly. And so, students will email teachers. I've had students email me. So at the secondary level, we do see students using those accounts, but we do have the ability to communicate to students via email. We typically don't do it often. I can think of one, maybe 2 times where we've messaged a student body, but we don't do it often. But we do have the capability if we need to.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon, John, Robin. So we're going to start taking some questions that came in from registrants. This one kind of ties in with an online question. So when it comes to increasing buy-in from staff, so one of our participants asked, they're getting ready to do a full-scale active shooter training at their high school, but on a weekend. And how do you engage and improve or get your staff to participate or volunteer in these off hours, full-scale exercises? Either one of you are welcome to take it. Brandon.
Sure. I've done this in the past. I will say, especially around active shooter, people are so intrigued by that topic. You don't have to press hard to get them to come out. Some of the other trainings and requirements, try to get them to come out on weekends a little more taxing. But certainly around the active shooter, and especially if they're doing full scale, where you have the whole drama piece and you have people with the drama club, and the director comes out and does all the makeup and all that kind of stuff. Typically, people want to be involved in that kind of thing. So but for the person asking the question, for those who don't find that interesting, right? It's typically, how can I get them to come, right? You have to entice them with something, right? So sometimes it's food, sometimes it's comp time, sometimes for kids it's extra credit, and so you kind of got to find things that make it appealing to those individuals to get that participation. Oftentimes, what I find is those who were hesitant or didn't want to do it, when they start hearing about it around the copier or the water cooler on Monday morning, they're all upset that they missed it, right? And then you have an influx of people in a wait list for the next time you do it.
Missed it on the coffee and donuts on Saturday morning. That's right. Robin, what are your thoughts on that, about increasing engagement with staff?
So I always start with what's in it for me perspective. So if we can offer that to faculty and staff, what's in it for me perspective, folks are more likely to support what they help shape. And so something I've done for our college is I've actually polled the staff and the faculty to say, what types of drills would you like? So let's just say they selected active shooter drill. The folks that want to see that are going to obviously be the most likely to participate. But again, I agree with you. You have to entice them. You have to entice them. But if you can change that attitude about what's in it for me, whether it's extra credit or comp time, that's sort of beside the point. But the preparedness piece, the culture shift, your students are relying on you to help them. Your students are looking to you for guidance. And so just the sense that you have of feeling prepared, because I hope that folks understand safety is a feeling, it's not a fact.
Yeah, another
John.
great way. Yeah, you're good, are there. Another great way to get security buy-in, just generally speaking, is to recognize outstanding work in the field of security. So, what we do in Loudon, we'll go out and recognize a staff member and or a student for outstanding work, whether it's a see something, say something win, whether it's just security awareness. We'll go out and present an award in front of the entire staff or in front of the admin team, whatever the principal decides is the best way to do it. And then we'll promote that on social media. And we've also created a School of the Year award when it comes to safety and security. And that's had a tremendous effect on forcing schools to kind of buy into safety and security because everyone wants to win the award, and rightly so. So that's been very beneficial here.
Sign me up, John. Well, and that goes back to the whole,
Yeah.
the whole underlying, the most fundamental layer of safety and security is culture, right? Building a culture of safety. And that's exactly it. You nailed it, John. Robin, what are your thoughts on that?
I was just going to share a little nugget of something that we've done that has been very popular. Some places it won't work for because you have assigned parking. We do not have assigned parking. And so oftentimes our faculty and staff are parking much further away. And of course, in the rain and the cold, things like that, it's always nice to have a close parking spot. So what I started doing was a safety selfie scavenger hunt. So let's just say there's 5 things, put it out. We advertise on social media, our newsletter, website, all of that. And you essentially had to take a selfie of your when you find the AED or when you find the fire extinguisher. But the prize was you can win your own free parking spot, whichever building you want, right at the front. And it's enticing, but it didn't cost any money. It didn't put anybody out, and it was very low key, very effective.
And that's the thing, Robin, and I'm glad you brought that's a project we've been working on or planning on working on with Zero Now is like a PSA campaign similar to that. Would love for you to be a part of that discussion. But you said something very important. You know, that culture is free, right? But it's the most fundamental aspect because you could have the best technology, the best access control system, best camera systems, best door locking mechanisms, best emergency communication systems, but if you don't, the Guy Blissner, one of our advisors, always uses the example of having this expensive access control door locking mechanism, but you put a rock on the side door when the door says keep door closed at all times. You just completely negated the entire value of having that secure entrance because you just propped it open. But it's difficult. I mean, it's a cultural thing. Not holding the door open for a stranger behind you when you're entering the school. These are all things that you got to contend with. We have 10 more minutes or under 10 minutes. We'll take a few more questions here. Stafford asks, this is open to either one of you, tips on crafting messages to parents to avoid panic. And this kind of goes into what we were talking earlier about having pre-scripted messages, at least that holding message. Anything you'd recommend, Robin?
I know it's a little different for us because not K-12, we're not necessarily reaching out to parents. So I'll let John and Brandon tack on to this. But essentially what I've found in crisis communication training and preparation is you need to tell people what to do, not what not to do. So don't come to the school. Start with something else. Wait, or give them something to do, and don't lead with don't do this, don't do that. Because what inevitably happens is they all do that. If you start with the to do, they are a little more apt to sort of pay attention and understand that direction is coming.
Yeah, so even the holding, Brandon, go, yeah, please.
Yeah, I think the other piece to that is something in the message needs to be very clear that the situation is under control, right? No matter how bad it is, right? It's under control. And again, that doesn't mean that it's perfect, right? It just means that we have our arms around it, and we're working through it. So, but Robin's spot on, right? It's you definitely don't tell people what not to do. Tell them what you want them to do, right? So, we had a swatting incident 2 years ago. And we told parents where to go. We didn't tell them not to come to the school where the incident was. We told them where to go. And we told them, some for our walkers, we told them where to go to pick up their kids. And for our bus riders, we told them where to go, right? So inevitably, that did help reduce people coming to the building, right? Because we gave them an action step to do. Because to Robin's point, right, you tell them not to come there. That kind of does the opposite, right? It's like, well, don't come here. That's because it's really bad. No. Right. You're just going to create more congestion, more parking, more people, and you're not going to be able to get to inside the building anyway. So that is important. You get people tasked, much like if for those of you out there that use the I love you guys reunification, right? When parents show up, they fill out that card, right? You give them something to do, right? Give them something to do while they're waiting through that process. And it's somewhat of it's twofold, right? It's serving a purpose for accountability, but it also is taking attention off of what they're thinking the worst and get it focused on something else for that window of time.
And Brandon, if I can add, oh, sorry.
No,
Brandon,
please,
if I can add, I think we all recognize being in the professions and especially all folks on this call, is reunification will become a second incident if you do not plan and you do not prepare for it. And that absolutely has to be part of your emergency plan. So when you're practicing all of these things, don't just practice the initial response. You need to practice the reunification. And again, have those different layers. What if your main reunification site is not available? Same thing with incident command. What if your main place of incident command is not available? And so your reunification will in fact become another incident if you do not enact a plan.
And we are going to go into much greater depth on reunification, not until the fall though, because we have the next few months are all booked up. We're going to take a break over the summer, but we'll be back in the fall to discuss that in much, much greater depth. Just a couple time for maybe one more question, maybe one or two. We had a registered question, knowing early detection saves lives. How are you budgeting to bring those solutions online? And so I'm just going to kind of take a step back from that. I mean, as far as initiating emergency response, what mechanisms do you have in place? We all know that like panic buttons are certainly one way to initiate response. Video analytics are certainly a way to initiate response. A human picking on the phone, dialing 911 is a way to initiate response. How do you detect threats earlier? What is the fastest way to detect a threat and then initiate response? Anyone is welcome to take this, Brandon.
Sure. I think that's all going to be circumstantial, all right? It's going to depend on what the threat is that you're detecting, right? So, it could be a piece of technology, or it could be the kid who often wanders off and daydreams and looks out the window and sees something that isn't right and says something to the teacher, right? And that was not caught on a piece of technology. So it varies, but I think to your point, whatever source that piece of technology, or I'm sorry, whatever source that threat is being detected from, I think what's most important is what is the follow-up, right? Because it's oftentimes people are like, oh yeah, well, I saw that before it happened, but who did you tell? Who did you report it to? What system did you
Right.
activate? Right. And so it's important to, once we recognize that threat or that concerning behavior, it's what is the follow-up process, right? And that's what we really need to be doing as much training on, is getting folks, students, adults, everyone alike, to understanding, once you have that information, what are you doing next steps, right? What have you been trained to do? What information are you sharing? What resources? And then are you going to those pieces of technology, those mass communication pieces, right? To let everybody else know what you now know.
John, I'm going to jump in your second here, but just to kind of piggyback on what you mentioned, Brandon, is that, technology, but having simple technology, I mean, because our goal is to prevent an event from happening in the first place, so we don't have to respond. But having a mechanism to see something, say something, to get that student help, whether harming themselves or harming others, is such a basic thing. It could be as simple as creating a simple form on a website, or just sending an email, or whatever that is. But that is such a critical thing. So those things, having those in place is absolutely critical. John, did you have a thought on that before we move on to the next thing? Okay. We only have a couple minutes left, so we have more questions than we had time to answer. So we're going to post these in the NCSSD community, our sister organizations. You all know NCSSD, the National Council of School Safety Directors, was a program of ZeroNow. It's its own standalone professional organization for school safety and security professionals. We encourage all of you to be a part of that organization if you not are already. But this recording will be in the community by Tuesday, but we'll post the questions that we're not able to answer today, and hopefully John and Brandon and Robin can go in there and just respond to those questions. But before we wrap it up, just want to give a moment for Brandon, John, and Robin to provide a final thought, their final thoughts or words of wisdom, key takeaways from this discussion. Robin, we'll start with you if that's all right.
Yeah, no, that's great. I always share four main takeaways from any time that I discuss this topic. And the first, foremost, very easy to remember, is plans do not equal preparedness. Plans do not equal preparedness. The second thing I always share is clarity is a force multiplier. We need clarity. The third thing is that under stress, we recognize that people are going to default to what they've practiced. And I know we've talked about that a lot in today's conversation. Lastly, I think Brandon might have mentioned this, a piece of this, but we're not trying to make it perfect. But what we are trying to do at the end of the day is just make it better from where we were.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. Very important as well. John, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with Robin. Training, training, training. We cannot train our staff too often. It's the only way we're going to create that muscle memory. that they need to respond efficiently and effectively to an incident in a school. None of us rise to the occasion during a school emergency. We all fall to the level of our training.
Yeah, and you've heard
Couldn't
me
say it
say
better.
this time and time again, and if anybody else has been with me in a training or at a conference, you hear me say this, and it's very true, right? Train like your life depends on it, and when the time to perform has come, the time to prepare has passed.
Absolutely. I'm gonna get that posted on my wall. We should make that available in the community as well. No, that's great, Brandon. That is absolutely true, and it really resonates. I've been thinking through that the whole time we're chatting today. So we are completely out of time. So if you do have any further questions in the NCSSD community, you can type your questions in there. I want to remind folks that our next month when is it? May. We're already in May, coming up, or April. April. I don't want to jump ahead. We'll be discussing securing graduation ceremonies. So be sure to register for that. We'll open that up later this week. So we'll hope to see you there. And thank you very much, Chief, Robin, John, and Brandon. Brandon, enjoy the rest of your vacation. Thanks for taking time out to join us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you all for attending and participating in this. This shows that you really care and you really want to make a difference. So thank you all. Have a good rest of the week and stay safe. Take care, guys.